Rent tracking starts with a due date. In how rent payments are tracked, the real-world version may be that a tenant pays on the first of each month because the lease says so. Consistent timing lets the landlord manage mortgage, maintenance, and expenses. Late or unclear timing can trigger fees or disputes. This is the detail that changes what to check next in how rent payments are tracked. That is the point where how rent payments are tracked becomes a real decision rather than an abstract idea. Payment method affects proof. It shows up in small moments, such as when bank transfer, check, online portal, or cash creates different records. Digital payments usually leave a cleaner trail. Renters paying cash should insist on receipts. Noticing that driver early can keep how rent payments are tracked from becoming harder to manage. The safer move in how rent payments are tracked is to test the facts before acting on the first impression. Receipts protect both sides. Look at a case where a landlord can confirm payment and the tenant can prove it was made. A simple record prevents memory-based arguments. The receipt should show date, amount, property, and period covered. The headline alone does not show the whole chain behind how rent payments are tracked. In this situation, the receipt should show date, amount, property, and period covered as the part that usually creates the real consequence. Online portals automate the process. A concrete version is when a rental platform may show balance, payment history, late fees, and documents. Automation reduces missed records. Tenants still need to check that the portal posted payments correctly. The background force should guide the next decision in how rent payments are tracked more than the first reaction. A careful response starts by noticing how a rental platform may show balance, payment history, late fees, and documents. Connects to tenants still need to check that the portal posted payments correctly. Ledger records organize history. In a normal day, a landlord may keep a rent ledger with charges, payments, credits, and balances. The ledger shows what is owed and what has been paid. Errors become easier to find when entries are chronological. In how rent payments are tracked, the clearer reading follows the cause instead of stopping at the visible result. That is the point where how rent payments are tracked becomes a real decision rather than an abstract idea. Partial payments need clear handling. Picture the situation where a tenant paying half the rent may still owe late fees depending on the agreement. Accepting partial money does not always erase default. Both sides need written confirmation of what remains. The moment becomes easier to handle when the moving part is named clearly in how rent payments are tracked. The safer move in how rent payments are tracked is to test the facts before acting on the first impression. Late fees should match the agreement. The clearest version is when a fee added without a lease basis can create conflict. Tracking includes charges as well as payments. Renters should compare the ledger with the lease terms. That mechanism explains why the topic affects real choices in how rent payments are tracked. In this situation, renters should compare the ledger with the lease terms as the part that usually creates the real consequence. Bank timing can matter. In how rent payments are tracked, someone may notice that a transfer sent on time may post a day later. Processing delays can affect whether payment is considered late. Tenants should know whether the rule is send date or received date. Seeing the cause early gives people more room to respond well in how rent payments are tracked. A careful response starts by noticing how a transfer sent on time may post a day later. Connects to tenants should know whether the rule is send date or received date. Shared rent adds complexity. Watch what happens when roommates may each pay a portion or one person may collect from everyone. The landlord may still treat the full rent as one obligation. Roommates need their own proof among themselves. In how rent payments are tracked, the visible event can distract from the driver that needs attention. That is the point where how rent payments are tracked becomes a real decision rather than an abstract idea. Security deposits are tracked separately. How rent payments are tracked becomes concrete when deposit money is not the same as monthly rent. Mixing the two can create confusion at move-out. Records should identify what each payment is for. When how rent payments are tracked appears in real life, this is the detail to check first. The safer move in how rent payments are tracked is to test the facts before acting on the first impression. Rent increases need a clean record. For example, a higher amount should appear after proper notice or renewal. Tracking shows when the new rent started. Unclear increase dates can lead to disputed balances. In how rent payments are tracked, this is the point where the visible choice and the real pressure start to meet. In this situation, unclear increase dates can lead to disputed balances as the part that usually creates the real consequence. Maintenance credits must be documented. In real life, a landlord may reduce rent because the tenant paid for an approved repair. Credits can disappear from memory if not recorded. Written approval protects the deduction. That is why how rent payments are tracked should be read through facts rather than a quick assumption. A careful response starts by noticing how a landlord may reduce rent because the tenant paid for an approved repair. Connects to written approval protects the deduction. Failed payments create a trail. Think about how a bounced check or rejected card payment may add fees and mark the rent unpaid. Tracking helps show what happened and when. Tenants should respond quickly rather than assume the issue fixed itself. For how rent payments are tracked, the important move is to notice the chain from first signal to final effect. That is the point where how rent payments are tracked becomes a real decision rather than an abstract idea. Rent history can help future applications. A simple how rent payments are tracked case is this. Proof of consistent payment may support a new rental application. Landlords often care about reliability. Organized records can become a renter's advantage. That sequence explains why how rent payments are tracked can grow even when the first moment looks small. The safer move in how rent payments are tracked is to test the facts before acting on the first impression. Tax and accounting rules affect landlords. How rent payments are tracked appears when rental income must usually be recorded for financial reporting. Accurate tracking separates rent, fees, deposits, and expenses. Poor records can cause problems beyond the tenant relationship. The early sign matters in how rent payments are tracked because it can change cost, trust, timing, or emotional meaning. In this situation, poor records can cause problems beyond the tenant relationship as the part that usually creates the real consequence. Disputes depend on documentation. One ordinary how rent payments are tracked version is that a tenant claiming payment and a landlord claiming non-payment need evidence. Bank statements, receipts, ledgers, and messages become important. The best time to build proof is before conflict. The pattern in how rent payments are tracked is easier to handle when the first signal is noticed instead of dismissed. A careful response starts by noticing how a tenant claiming payment and a landlord claiming non-payment need evidence. Connects to the best time to build proof is before conflict. Automatic payments are useful but not perfect. Consider the moment when a tenant may set autopay and forget an expired card or changed rent amount. Automation reduces effort but still needs monitoring. Checking monthly avoids silent mistakes. The answer in how rent payments are tracked is usually found in the cause, not in the label people attach afterward. That is the point where how rent payments are tracked becomes a real decision rather than an abstract idea. Move-out balances require final accounting. How rent payments are tracked becomes clearer when unpaid rent, deposit deductions, and utility charges may be reconciled after leaving. The rent ledger should match the final statement. Clear records reduce surprise bills. Once the cause is named in how rent payments are tracked, the response can fit the situation more closely. The safer move in how rent payments are tracked is to test the facts before acting on the first impression. Good tracking is simple and consistent. In how rent payments are tracked, notice when pay the same way, save confirmations, label transfers, and keep lease documents together. Small habits prevent large confusion. Rent is too important to leave to screenshots scattered across messages. The link between those pieces is what makes how rent payments are tracked useful in real life. In this situation, rent is too important to leave to screenshots scattered across messages as the part that usually creates the real consequence. How rent payments are tracked needs to be understood through a specific real-life case. A familiar how rent payments are tracked example is when rent payments are tracked so everyone knows where the account stands. The process is not only about collecting money, it creates proof, timing, and trust. A clean record can turn a tense disagreement into a solvable accounting question. People often feel pressure around how rent payments are tracked before they can explain where it came from. A careful response starts by noticing how rent payments are tracked so everyone knows where the account stands. Connects to a clean record can turn a tense disagreement into a solvable accounting question.